On this episode of the CyberWatch podcast, it's cloudy with a chance of outages, new tools and techniques are meeting the challenges of new attacks, and it's time for the last planned patches of the year. All this and more today in CyberWatch. Hello, and welcome to the CyberWatch podcast for the week of December 15th, 2024. This is your weekly roundup of the top cybersecurity news and analysis curated by the analysts at Access Point Consulting. I'm your host, Curtis Franklin. Let's get to the news. Accounting and consulting giant Deloitte has issued a public statement in response to a ransomware group's claim that it had stolen more than a terabyte of information from the firm. Criminal group BrainCipher has hit other organizations in the past, notably Indonesian government functions in June of this year. According to Deloitte's statement, the theft was limited to data on a single system outside the company's network, with no impact on Deloitte systems. Now, this is not the first time in 2024 that Deloitte has found itself responding to data theft after a September incident in which the hacker Intel Broker stole data, again, from a system outside Deloitte's network. Analysts point out that minimizing the impact of incidents like these boils down to educating users on evolving threats and updating security arrangements with contractors, partners, and clients on a regular basis. If you like to save money by ordering Android smartphones from Asia, you'll want to pay attention to this next story. Researchers have found that the links between China's security organizations and its malware-producing contractors seem to be growing tighter. All this with the discovery of Eagle Message Spy, malware that provides surveillance of mobile device activity and relays the data to Chinese government servers. The malware has been traced to a small developer in Wuhan that has a history of creating forensic tools for Chinese state security and law enforcement agencies. In this case, once installed, the malware regularly reports activities like SMS messages and browsing histories back to command and control servers using IP addresses long associated with government activities. The good news is that there must be local access to the device in order to install the malware. The bad news is that anyone traveling to China or ordering Android-based mobile devices from China should be wary. Security scans on the devices are recommended. Next up, we have issues facing three of the large cloud infrastructures, AWS, Microsoft, and Meta. First, AWS customers continue to misconfigure their cloud instances in ways that make stealing data a piece of digital cake for threat actors. Independent cybersecurity researchers found that French-speaking threat actors with possible ties to the Nemesis and Shiny Hunters hackers groups were scamming millions of websites and using misconfiguration-based vulnerabilities to steal sensitive data. And the data stolen was truly sensitive, including AWS customer keys and secrets, database credentials, Git credentials and source code, SMT credentials, API keys for services like Twilio, Binance, and SendGrid, SSH credentials, cryptocurrency-related keys and mnemonics, and sensitive access credentials for other cloud services and sites. The criminals then didn't go to the dark web, but instead sold the data in a dedicated Telegram channel, earning, according to experts, hundreds of euros per breach. Now, AWS was quick to point out that this was not a breach in or a vulnerability of AWS itself. It was an issue with the configuration of cloud instances and therefore, under the shared responsibility model, the job of the customers to be aware of and fix. And in one of those ironies that makes reporting on cybersecurity interesting, the criminals were storing all of the stolen data in an AWS S3 bucket that was completely open access because of a misconfiguration. According to analysts, encrypting stored data, carefully checking configurations, limiting data access to essential personnel, and monitoring network activity can each play a critical role in preventing damage from this type of exploit. In another configuration-based issue, Microsoft customers saw online access to Office 365 applications and the Admin Center on December 10. While the outage was not blamed on an attack, Microsoft did say that the issue was traced back to a service change that introduced an issue with identifying the token expiration time, causing authentication requests to fail. That makes it a misconfiguration issue for at least one level of the application stack. Now, while it may be impossible for an organization using Office 365 to have other service options for office productivity applications, a solid backup strategy and some level of offline backup functionality can help protect against the worst effects of a service outage that lasts more than a few minutes. The day after Microsoft's service outage, Meta was busy fixing problems as Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Threads experienced significant technical disruptions. Hundreds of thousands of Facebook users began reporting issues a bit past noon Eastern Time on December 11th, with similar reports for Instagram, WhatsApp, and Threads following. By 3 o'clock Eastern, the number of problems being reported had declined massively, with all individual customer accounts restored by 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Business accounts and management panels were still having issues at the day's end, and Meta has, so far, given no additional information on either the source of or remediation for the problems. What all of these outages reinforce is the importance that cloud-based services have in the corporate sphere, and the rather limited power most companies have to remedy problems when something goes wrong. Minimizing damage rather than being able to avoid them entirely is the order of the day and the priority for enterprise IT and security managers. Now, when it comes to tracking down issues and finding new attack methods, the threat hunters aren't standing still. Red teams, groups of penetration testers whose job it is to mimic the activities of a dedicated threat actor, have a new tool that offers a sophisticated method to execute system commands on compromised hosts through Microsoft Teams. The new tool, Convo C2, leverages Microsoft Teams to infiltrate an organization and exfiltrate data, all the while making detection significantly challenging for blue teams or groups of defenders. This new tool doesn't require direct communication between victim and criminal, instead embedding commands into hidden span tags within Microsoft Teams messages. All HTTP requests from the victim are sent exclusively to Microsoft servers. Since most antivirus solutions don't really look at Microsoft Teams log files, the malicious activity tends to go unnoticed. Analysts say that this once again points out the importance of limiting team communications outside the organization and continuing to carefully monitor network traffic for unusual, unauthorized communications. And in the realm of threat hunting, a group being called Payroll Pirates is responsible for an ongoing malicious spear phishing campaign targeting company employees with human resources phishing scams to carry out payroll redirects. The attacks have so far primarily focused on Workday users and high-profile organizations, including the California Employment Development Department, Kaiser Permanente, Macy's, New York Life, and Roche. It's a sophisticated threat actor group that earlier targeted Lowe's using a custom directory structure to match the real Lowe's HR portal structure to increase the credibility of the phishing site. Analysts say that all HR redirects carry some level of risk, but the primary mitigation tools are going to be education campaigns that teach employees the dangers of phishing campaigns and what a well-funded, high-experienced threat actor can do to trap unwary users. It's time for the final planned system updates of the year, and first up was Apple, which pushed out major security updates to fix security flaws across the iOS and macOS ecosystems. The company called immediate attention to its iOS 18.2 and macOS Sequoia 15.2 patches, warning of flaws in the kernel, WebKit, Apple Mobility file integrity, passwords, and Image I/O components. Must be noted that Apple also shipped security-themed updates for watchOS, tvOS, and Vision OS. Adobe joined the update list with patches to more than 160 vulnerabilities across 16 products. Adobe Experience Manager was the big winner with more than 90 issues patched in the latest update. There were also 22 vulnerabilities in Connect, more than a dozen security issues in Adobe Animate, and 9 vulnerabilities, including arbitrary code execution bugs, in InDesign. Beyond these, the half-dozen vulnerabilities in Adobe Acrobat and Reader will be of interest to many organizations, as will updates for FrameMaker, Premiere Pro, Bridge, Photoshop, PDFL SDK, and After Effects. Adobe said that it is not yet aware of any exploits for any of these vulnerabilities in the wild. Finally, Microsoft issued patches for 71 vulnerabilities, including 16 considered critical in its final Patch Tuesday for 2024. Only one of these vulnerabilities, in the Windows Common Log File System driver, has been exploited in the wild, while Windows Remote Desktop Services had the most vulnerabilities patched, with none having been exploited outside a lab. As always, analysts urge companies to have a robust patching methodology in place and to follow their own processes and procedures when it comes to patches and updates whenever they are issued. Well, that's it for this week. Please join us again next time for the CyberWatch podcast, brought to you by Access Point Consulting. And be sure to visit CyberWatch on LinkedIn and at www.accesspointconsulting.com. And follow us or subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. I'm Curtis Franklin. We'll see you next time on the CyberWatch podcast.